Chapter 22. Hosea and I wrote to each other countless letters, silly letters. We would write every day until we had accumulated 20 pages or so. Then we would mail them and pore over the other's words. Nothing sexual. Never sexual, just life, our goals, our dreams, our plans, school and money. He signed every letter, yours, and I hated it. Just once I wanted him to slip up and write love. He never did. April of 1999 came, and my father had had enough with the house. Your mother's house, he'd taken to calling it. Every corner and room reminded him too much of my mother. After 4 years, they still weren't divorced, despite Jake and Mom having my baby sister Rochelle, who would be turning 1 that year. We moved across town, and I recruited as many of my bohemian friends as I could find. Only Hosea showed up. Hosea and I never touched. Not once, never hugged, never touched. The sexual tension was unbearable. Everyone in school had felt it since the infamous slap of '91. But we reveled in it. I bathed in it. To hold that tension and never sate it, I wallowed in that glorious tension. I told him I loved him. And as always, he answered with thank you. I smiled and said it again. He smiled and said nothing. That night in my room, I stared up at him. He wouldn't touch me. Instead, he gave me a ring. A simple band with wire wrapped around 2 beads. Even when he handed it to me, our fingers did not touch. I slipped the ring on and held up my hand. He held up his, and I placed my palm against his. It was the only time we ever touched. I spread his fingers and folded my fingers down over his, but he kept his palm open. "I can't kiss you," he whispered. "I know that," I said, smiling. "I need to go to bed now," he said. The heat that speared me ricocheted off him. Regardless, he stood, bid me good night, and left my room. I crawled into bed that night, a smile glued to my face and a ring on my finger. Sunlight filled my room. I remember the night before and slipped into the hall. Hosea was there at the top of the stairs, laying on his makeshift bed of blankets and pillows. I slipped into the room and kneeled down beside him. His hair fell into his face, and I reached out and brushed it back. He looked up at me. "Behave," he whispered, and I obeyed. The stairs creaked, and behind me my father stood. After a mumbled apology, he went back downstairs, but the moment had ended. I would not be kissing Hosea that day. We proceeded to write every day, but my deepest secrets, the ones I could not share with Hosea, I wrote down in a journal. My 19th birthday came, and Scott treated me to a weekend in New York. After 2 blowjobs in the car, he fucked me, then took me out on the town. We went to the Met and MoMA. He took me to Lincoln Center, and we attended the Mozart concert that spring. We took a boat around Manhattan and Liberty Island. I got sick and threw up. I still can't be on a boat. By the 2nd day, Scott knew something was up. "Who's Hosea?" My body went cold. "What? You talk in your sleep," he said. "I talk in my sleep. I always talk in my sleep." "Who's Hosea?" he repeated. I cannot lie, and so I said nothing. "Hand it over!" I furrowed my face. "What?" "Your journal!" I wanted to vomit or die. Maybe I could fall on a knife between the bed and the table. I took up my journal and handed it over. "Sit down," he said to me. I obeyed and sat on the bed while he turned each page and read aloud the words that poured over my heart. Maybe I would die suddenly right there. I wished. I don't remember what he said, but I remember the tone. He stood there over me, screaming. I hadn't touched Hosea. I only loved him. Was that so wrong? More screaming, more rage. My body grew wet as it prepared for sex, and I hated myself. His tone intensified with the urge to fuck something. The fear shook my body and my juices flowed. Scott's hand flew across my face. Now that was something I knew. At last, something I could understand. Something I could work with. Something I recognized. I absorbed the burn and took the hit. I looked back at him, hate welling up in my eyes. I could feel his hand imprinted on the right side of my face. It burned, and was reminding me of one simple truth I had long since forgotten. That day I left Joe. It all flooded back, and the words of Shakespeare rang back in my head. To thine own self be true. Had I not been? I suppressed a grin. I can no longer be with you, I said. God, my face burned. He said something. I don't remember. It didn't matter. All that mattered was that he understood this now. It was over. I would not be with a man who hit me. I would not be that woman. I cannot be with you, I said again. He insisted I was full of it. He didn't believe me. It didn't matter. I may move in with him. I may marry him. I may fuck him. But I would not stay. I don't stay. I never stay. We had tickets to 3 Broadway productions, an off-Broadway show and a play that weekend. We kept the dates despite the events of that morning. He had insisted on it. I was on my guard. He was notorious for pulling awards when I disobeyed. After that weekend, he would spend the next month punishing me with guilt. After everything I gave you, you did this to me. That was the one lesson he ensured I learned that weekend. Between that weekend and my father, I would never willingly accept another gift from anyone ever again. Gifts were a unique branch of manipulation used to provoke guilt. I hate receiving gifts. A gift is owed, debt, and I had a backlog. He taught me another lesson that week. Commitment, he said to me. Commitment. The word ran through my head like poison. Commitment. And what is that exactly? The bars that hold you in a prison long before you've worn out your welcome? Or something a lover or partner says when the fear of abandonment arises? Commitment. I have loved many people. Love is ever-changing, evolutionary. Love changes, it grows, it evolves. It's fast and slow. It's warm, it's fire, it's hot. It cools and sometimes it fades completely while other times it moves like the ebb and flow of a tidal river. Only one thing is ever certain about love. It changes. Commitment, though. Commitment isn't love. Commitment is dedication. It's something I give to my music, my goals, my dreams. It's something I reserve for myself. Commit to another? Why should I have commitment for a lover? When I love a man, it is out of love for that man that I try not to hurt him, not because of a promise I may not be able to keep. Sometimes I love so much that I want no other. I still don't consider that commitment. I call it love. But love may stay, it may go. I may stop loving him. I am in no position to predict that. People change, and they can too easily become something we can't love. Sometimes 2 people grow together, and sometimes they grow apart. Sometimes you wake up one day and you think, what am I doing? Well, other days your love flexes and flows. You grow together, you grow apart, you grow closer, you fall apart. No one can predict love. The only predictable thing about love is that it is too unpredictable to predict. Commitment is not meant for love. Why would I ever commit myself to something as unpredictable and ever-changing as love? I couldn't say it then, but that day, commitment would take on a whole other meaning I would explore. Commitment, he said. Commitment. And all I could think of was the music I would write. I could not give up on that. Commitment. I would show him.